In mid-2025, the United States finds itself at a crossroads of political polarization, with public sentiment sharply divided over the actions and leadership style of President Donald Trump, who returned to office following the 2024 presidential election. The convergence of the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary celebration, Trump's 79th birthday, and Flag Day on June 14, 2025, has become a flashpoint for protests and a focal point for public discourse on platforms like X. The hashtag #NoKings, alongside related terms like hashtag #TrumpIsUnfitForOffice and hashtag #TraitorTrump, has gained traction as a rallying cry for activists who view Trump's policies and public displays, particularly the military parade in Washington, D.C., as emblematic of authoritarian tendencies that threaten democratic norms. This analysis will delve into the origins and organization of these protests, the role of social media, specifically X, in shaping public sentiment, the criticisms of Trump's actions as undermining democratic principles, and the broader implications for American political culture. By examining X posts from June 12 and 14, 2025, news reports, and historical parallels, we will unpack the complex interplay of patriotism, dissent, and political theater in this moment of national significance. The U.S. Army's 250th anniversary and Trump's military parade. Historical context of the U.S. Army's anniversary. The U.S. Army was established on June 14, 1775, when the Second Continental Congress voted to create the Continental Army to defend the American colonies against British forces. This marked the birth of the nation's first national military institution, predating the Declaration of Independence by over a year. The 250th anniversary in 2025 was planned as a major milestone, with the Army organizing a multifaceted celebration in Washington, D.C. including a festival, fitness competitions, historical reenactments, and a grand military parade featuring 6,600 soldiers, 150 vehicles, 50 aircraft, and other displays of military might. The event was initially conceived in early 2024 as a nonpartisan celebration of the Army's legacy, with planning documents emphasizing its historical significance and its role in inspiring future generations. However, the addition of a large-scale military parade, reportedly at Trump's behest, shifted the tone of the event, aligning it with his personal vision of showcasing American strength. The parade's alignment with Trump's 79th birthday and Flag Day added further complexity, as critics perceived it as an attempt to intertwine national pride with personal glorification. Trump's vision for the parade. Donald Trump has long expressed admiration for military parades, inspired by events like France's Bastille Day celebration, which he attended in 2017. During his first term, he unsuccessfully pushed for a similar display in Washington, D.C., but logistical and cost concerns, coupled with public and political pushback, prevented it. In 2025, however, the Army's 250th anniversary provided a convenient opportunity to realize this ambition. The parade, set to take place on June 14 along Constitution Avenue, includes 28 Abrams tanks, 28 Bradley fighting vehicles, 28 Stryker vehicles, 4 Paladin howitzers, 50 aircraft, and historical reenactments, culminating in a parachute jump by the Army's Golden Knights and a flag presentation to Trump. Trump has framed the event as a celebration of American military strength and patriotism, stating, "This parade salutes our soldiers' remarkable strength and unbeatable spirit," and promising it will be better and bigger than any parade we've ever had in this country. However, the decision to hold the parade on his birthday, coupled with his administration's involvement in its planning through America 250, a congressionally authorized but increasingly Trump-aligned organization, has fueled accusations that the event is less about honoring the Army and more about self-aggrandizement. Financial and logistical concerns. The parade's estimated cost ranges from $25 million to $45 million, with some critics, such as those in the No Kings movement, claiming it could exceed $100 million when accounting for city cleanup and infrastructure repairs. The Army has taken steps to mitigate damage to D.C. streets, such as laying down steel plates to protect roads from heavy tanks, but concerns persist about the financial burden on taxpayers, especially given Trump's concurrent push for federal budget cuts, including to the Department of Veterans Affairs and other social programs. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has expressed reservations about the parade's impact, noting that tanks could damage city infrastructure and suggesting that the Army should cover repair costs. The event's scale, including road closures, security measures, and a 90-minute suspension of flights at Reagan National Airport, underscores its logistical complexity and potential for disruption. The No Kings protests. Organization and motivations. Origins and scope of the protests. The No Kings protests, scheduled for June 14, 2025, represent a coordinated nationwide effort to oppose what organizers describe as Trump's authoritarian tendencies. Led by progressive groups like Indivisible, the Women's March, and the 50501 movement, alongside unions like the American Federation of Teachers and organizations like Planned Parenthood, the protests are expected to take place in over 1,800 cities across all 50 states and Puerto Rico. This scale makes it one of the largest single-day protest efforts against Trump since his second term began in January 2025. The protests are explicitly timed to coincide with the Army's 250th anniversary parade, which organizers view as a self-aggrandizing spectacle funded by taxpayers to bolster Trump's image. The No Kings campaign draws on historical symbolism, noting that June 14 marks the day Americans first organized to resist monarchical rule by forming the Continental Army. Protesters argue that Trump's actions, such as deploying the National Guard and Marines to quell immigration-related protests in Los Angeles, threatening heavy force against D.C. protesters, and using the military parade to celebrate his birthday, mirror the behavior of authoritarian leaders who elevate themselves above democratic institutions. Key grievances. The No Kings movement articulates several grievances against Trump's policies and leadership style. Authoritarian displays. Critics, including California Governor Gavin Newsom and Representative Jason Crow, Democrat Colorado, compare the military parade to displays in authoritarian regimes like China, Russia, or North Korea, arguing that it prioritizes Trump's ego over national unity. Newsom has called it a vulgar display to celebrate his birthday, just as other failed dictators have done. Erosion of democratic norms. Protesters accuse Trump of undermining checks and balances, citing his administration's moves to fire senior military officers, slash federal programs, and bypass Congress on issues like immigration enforcement. Newsom has claimed that the rule of law has increasingly been given way to the rule of Don. Misuse of military resources. The parade's cost, estimated at $25 to $45 million, is seen as wasteful, particularly when juxtaposed with cuts to veterans' health care and social services. Representative Steve Cohen, Democrat Tennessee, introduced a bill to prohibit public funds for displays of military force for personal glorification. Immigration policies. Trump's deployment of troops to Los Angeles to address protests against Immigration and Customs Enforcement (IC) raids has intensified opposition, with organizers framing it as an overreach of federal power, partisan use of the military. The involvement of Trump-aligned figures, such as Ariel Abergel, in America 250's planning and the partisan tone of Trump's Fort Bragg rally have raised concerns about the politicization of the military, which is traditionally expected to remain nonpartisan. Protest strategies and locations to avoid being labeled anti-veteran. The No Kings organizers have intentionally avoided holding a major protest in Washington, D.C., focusing instead on cities like Philadelphia, Houston, and Alexandria, Virginia. The largest protest is planned for noon in Philadelphia, where the Declaration of Independence was adopted, symbolizing a rejection of monarchical rule. In Houston, rallies are scheduled at City Hall and other public spaces, with organizers emphasizing nonviolence and community safety. Protesters plan to use signs, speeches, and symbolic imagery, such as No Kings banners and inflatable Trump costumes, to convey their message. The movement has also leveraged social media, particularly X, to amplify its reach, with hashtags like #NoKingsProtest and #TrumpIsUnFitForOffice trending in the days leading up to June 14. Public sentiment on X, hashtags and discourse. The role of X in shaping sentiment. X has emerged as a critical platform for gauging and amplifying public sentiment around the protests and the Army's anniversary parade. Posts from June 12 and 14, 2025, reveal a polarized landscape, with some users celebrating the parade as a patriotic event and others condemning it as a dangerous precedent for authoritarianism. The hashtag #NoKings has become a central rallying point for critics, used to mock Trump's perceived, king-like, demeanor and to mobilize support for the protests. Key X posts and themes criticism of Trump's king-like behavior. A post by @Leopard and Backup on June 10 states, "We the people are protesting Trump acting like a king and throwing himself a North Korea-style military parade. We do not have kings in this country." This reflects the sentiment that the parade is a personal vanity project rather than a celebration of the army. @Limerick tweets on June 13 uses a limerick to mock Trump. Donald Trump may pull on heartstrings as he parades his military playthings but with no thrones and crowns if it rains, he drowns because in this country we have #NoKings. This post combines humor with a serious critique of Trump's leadership style. @Tosca Austin on June 13 describes the protests as a response to Trump's dictator branding, highlighting the overlap with the Army's anniversary and accusing him of hijacking the event. Defense of Trump and the parade. @Constitution Ally on June 13 celebrates the convergence of the Army's anniversary, Flag Day, and Trump's birthday, framing the protests as an overreaction by the left, that is, traumatized and triggered by patriotic displays. Supporters argue that the parade is a legitimate celebration of the Army's legacy and that Trump's involvement is incidental, given the historical significance of June 14. They dismiss the "No Kings" protests as anti-American or anti-military accusations of hypocrisy and partisanship. @Evenler on June 12 accuses Trump of hijacking a two-year planned Army celebration and causing $16 million in damage to D.C. streets, using the hashtag #FuckTrump to express outrage. @FeistyLibLady on June 12 counters Trump's claim that protesters hate America, arguing that they are exercising their democratic rights to oppose his policies. Broader sentiment analysis. The X posts reflect a broader divide in public sentiment, anti-Trump sentiment. Critics use hashtags like #NoKings, #TrumpIsUnfitForOffice, and #TraitorTrump to frame the protests as a defense of democracy against authoritarianism. They view the parade as a symbol of Trump's attempt to centralize power and elevate himself above democratic institutions. The term king-like resonates with historical fears of monarchical overreach, invoking the American Revolution's rejection of King George III. Pro-Trump sentiment. Supporters see the parade as a celebration of American strength and Trump's leadership in restoring military. Criticisms of Trump's undermining of democratic norms. Historical context. Democratic norms and the military. Democratic norms in the United States emphasize the separation of powers, civilian control of the military, and the nonpartisan nature of federal institutions. The military, in particular, is expected to remain apolitical, serving the Constitution rather than any individual leader. Trump's actions, including his involvement in the Army's anniversary parade, his deployment of troops to Los Angeles, and his rhetoric about using heavy force against protesters, have raised concerns about the politicization of the military and the erosion of these norms. Historically, military parades in the U.S. have been rare and typically tied to specific victories, such as the 1991 Gulf War Parade, which cost $12 million and was debated for its appropriateness. Critics argue that Trump's parade, with its personal and partisan overtones, deviates from this tradition and aligns more closely with authoritarian displays in countries like North Korea or Russia. Specific actions criticize politicization of the military. Trump's rally at Fort Bragg, where he mocked former President Joe Biden and California Governor Gavin Newsom, was organized by America 250 but drew criticism for violating the Army's nonpartisan ethos. The presence of pro-Trump merchandise at the event further blurred the line between military and political spheres. The appointment of Trump-aligned figures, such as Ariel Abergil as executive director of America 250, has raised concerns about the organization's neutrality. Critics argue that the group, meant to oversee a nonpartisan celebration, has become an extension of Trump's White House operation. Threats against protesters. On June 10, Trump warned that any protesters at the D.C. parade would be met with very heavy force, a statement that critics, including Newsom, have called authoritarian. This rhetoric, combined with the deployment of 4,000 troops and 700 Marines to Los Angeles to address immigration protests, has fueled fears of military overreach. The Secret Service and D.C. officials have downplayed the likelihood of violence, noting that 9 small protests are planned and expected to remain peaceful. However, the presence of extensive security measures, including metal detectors, anti-scale fencing, and drones, underscores the tension surrounding the event. Disregard for checks and balances. Newsom and others argue that Trump's actions, such as federalizing the California National Guard and bypassing Congress on immigration policy, undermine the separation of powers. The administration's rapid moves to fire senior military officers and slash federal programs have further fueled accusations of centralizing power. Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman, Democrat, New Jersey, has criticized the Trump administration for making decisions about America 250 without consulting its bipartisan congressional commission, calling it a violation of democratic oversight. Broader implications for American political culture: polarization and the role of protests. The No Kings protests and the Army's 250th anniversary parade highlight the deep polarization in American society. The scale of the protests, potentially involving millions across 1,800 cities, reflects a growing resistance to Trump's leadership style, particularly among progressive and pro-democracy groups. This follows earlier protest movements in 2025, such as the 50501 movement and Hands Off protests, which focused on issues like immigration and federal overreach. The protests also underscore the power of grassroots organizing in the digital age. The rapid spread of the No Kings campaign, amplified by X and other platforms, demonstrates how social media can mobilize disparate groups around a unified message. However, the absence of a major D.C. protest may limit the movement's visibility, as organizers seek to avoid direct confrontation with the military parade. The military as a political symbol. The controversy over the parade raises questions about the military's role in American political life. While the Army has emphasized its commitment to democratic values, with spokesman Steve Warren noting its motto, "This will defend," the event's partisan undertones risk undermining public trust in the military's neutrality. Senior Army leaders have expressed concern about being drawn into Trump's partisan machinations, highlighting the tension between institutional integrity and political pressure. Long-term consequences. The events of June 14, 2025, could have lasting implications for American democracy. If the protests remain peaceful and widespread, they may strengthen the pro-democracy movement, galvanizing opposition to Trump's policies ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Conversely, any violence or escalation, particularly if Trump follows through on his threat of heavy force, could deepen divisions and erode public faith in democratic institutions. The parade's alignment with Trump's broader agenda, including the 2026 FIFA World Cup and 2028 Olympics, suggests an attempt to create a narrative of national greatness under his leadership. However, the backlash from critics, including high-profile figures like Newsom and Crow, indicates that this strategy may further alienate those already skeptical of Trump's intentions. Conclusion. The planned protests on June 14, 2025, and the public sentiment expressed on X through hashtags like #NoKings reflect a critical moment in American political discourse. The U.S. Army's 250th anniversary, intended as a celebration of national pride, has been overshadowed by its alignment with Trump's birthday and his vision for a grandiose military parade. Critics argue that this event, coupled with actions like deploying troops to Los Angeles and threatening protesters, underscores Trump's king-like demeanor and threatens democratic norms. Supporters, however, view the parade as a legitimate tribute to the military and a reflectee.